What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football, sports betting, and NASCAR home. I am your host, Kyle Robert. You can follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. Give us a follow over on Instagram at AOP Podcast. We're posting a bunch of content over there with some rankings and some other stuff. So give us a follow there. We'll be trying to keep you guys updated all season long. But joining me once again to talk our favorite sleepers, this time at tight end, it's Brian Twining. What's up, Brian?
Man, I told you pre-show, but I hate this position.
Love this position. Love this position. Tight end is one of the positions I always want to get a couple guys. I don't know why. Like obviously, and we talked in our tight end preview about kind of our general strategy and whatnot, and getting someone like Kelsey or Kittle is, or even Darren Waller is really nice. But there is plenty of options and plenty of targets to go after as we kind of work our way down. But Brian, I did want to ask you for your opinion since you're our resident Cowboys fan. Blake Jarwin and Dalton Schultz are both later round options. Jarwin seems to be the preference based upon ADP, but Dalton looked good. He had almost 90 targets last year. Jarwin was basically out for the year. I mean, Dak was basically out for the year, so I don't want to glean too much with maybe they could build up a rapport or whatnot. But if you're in drafts and you have to take a Cowboys tight end, which one are you taking?
I'm probably going to lean on Jarwin as being
Okay.
kind of the more downfield type of tight end to attack the middle of the field than Dalton Schultz, who I know we saw him show out last year, but the majority of his damage was done, on the perimeter, running kind of a bunch of like flash routes or a bunch of quick outs, and he's not used as somebody that's threatening the defense deep. So I like Jarwin as a guy who could break down the defense and take advantage of those three big names on the outside.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how I've been drafting, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something, and I'm still not sure what to do with Jarwin because that offense with Gallup, with Amari Cooper, with
Yep.
CD, with Tony Pollard out of the backfield, with the healthy Zeke. I mean, the Cowboys are going to probably throw a bunch, so it might make things a little bit easier. But that's a lot of mouths to feed for kind of Jarwin and or Schultz. And it might be a situation where they both see enough where it's kind of, you don't really want either one.
Yeah, I see that scenario, that scheme setting up for the tight ends to see maybe 6 to 8 targets max on a weekly basis. So I just don't think there's going to be the volume for them. Now, that being said, I do think that Jarwin and Schultz will be heavily utilized inside the red zone, potentially he's catching touchdowns, but you can't rely on scoring, or you can't rely on a guy to score every week in terms of looking at fantasy. So it's going to be difficult to choose which one you're playing on a week-to-week basis. So it's probably a situation that, maybe late in drafts I'd be looking at, but not a consistency type of thing that I'm looking to roster.
Yeah. Like I think I'm with you. Like in Scott Fishbowl, I took Jarwin just because tight ends are so valuable there. But yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be 100-ish targets to that tight end position, and we'll see how the split goes. I'm optimistic Jarwin can see most of that, but based upon him coming back from injury and Schultz actually performing well, maybe they see some sort of timeshare, and it does get annoying. But Jarwin is somebody I'm interested. But let's talk about some guys we're a little more interested in, and some guys with upside. And then like we did with quarterbacks, if you missed that, go check out that. We talked some of our favorite sleeper options. Maybe I'll throw out a few names at the end just to get a quick thought or two. I want to talk about Robert Tonyan, tight end 18. By the way, so all of our ADP comes from Fantasy Football or Fantasy Pros, and it's a combination of Yahoo Fantrax and Fantasy Football Calculator. Tight end for all the positions seems to have the most wild swings. So really understand where you're drafting and who you're drafting with, because you'll see in some leagues, for example, Robert Tonyan. In Yahoo, he's going as the tight end 12. So the Yahoo analysts really like him. They pushed him up. They're probably talking about him. They probably rank him high in their individual rankings. and therefore he goes a little higher. Now, if you go over to Fantrax, he's tight end 16. So he's definitely going out like at or outside the top 12. So that's the only reason I was even considering including him. But know the league, know the people you're drafting with, look at the ADP before, because there's a bunch of these guys that we like and we're happy to take kind of wherever they come off the board. But if one league is drafting Robert Tonyan as a top 8 guy, and that helps somebody else you like maybe a little bit better fall to you, then go that route. But for this, I'm using Fantasy Pros ADP. Tonyan was a guy that really broke out in a big way. The up in the airness of Aaron Rodgers was, kind of driving down the ADP of all Green Bay Packers. It seems like all signs point to him coming back. He didn't retire like he expected. It seems like it was a lot of song and dance for nothing really changing in Green Bay. But Brian, so we kind of have talked about it before, and Aaron Rodgers has traditionally never been a utilize my tight end a ton guy, especially when you get in the red zone or getting in close. There wasn't a lot of touchdown percentage. Jermichael Finley was probably his best option, and that was for like a season or two. And I know like Jimmy Graham came in, and people got excited about him, and I was always pessimistic. But Tonyan broke out in a big way. The 11 touchdowns he scored, I probably not sustainable, especially on the volume, and that would be my biggest concern about him potentially kind of living up to those numbers in 2021. There was a lot of games with 1 or 2 or 3 targets, so that's not ideal. But with really outside of Devontae Adams, nobody that needs 90 or 100 targets. MVS and Alan Lazard and Equanimeous St. Brown are all interesting. Obviously, Aaron Jones will see a little bit of work out of the backfield. We'll see what A.J. Dillon looks like. But there's opportunity here for a second playmaker to be a big factor, and especially when they get in close. And maybe it's not 11, maybe it's 6 or 7 or 8 touchdowns. But if that volume on a week-to-week basis steps up just a little bit, and he's seeing maybe like 4 targets a game instead of like 2, you could have a legitimate top 10-ish option come season's end, even if those touchdowns regress a little bit. So for me, at outside that like tight end 14 or so, I would be very happy to snag Tonyan.
Yeah, I completely agree with you with his current ADP being somewhere that I'd be comfortable drafting him at, especially knowing that the majority of his scoring was via the touchdown. Now, he did have a 5-game streak from weeks 10 through 14 where he caught a touchdown in all 5 of those games, which is something that's really intriguing when looking at the fact that, like you said, Aaron Rodgers does not normally target tight ends anywhere throughout the field. And the fact that he was looking for Tonyan in the end zone, I think shows a lot in terms of the trust that Rodgers has with him. Now, I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, but Devin Funchess returning will probably, I don't think he's going to make an immediate impact.
Play Hail to the Victors.
But his big-bodied type of skill set is one that Tonyan kind of occupied at the tight end position, and maybe he kind of takes away some of those red zone looks from Tonyan, which is the only reason why I would kind of be worried about that touchdown percentage. But I mean, he did all this on just 59 targets last year, which is something that's completely sustainable in this offense as long as Aaron Rodgers is playing quarterback. Now, if it's Jordan Love, he's probably not a dude that I'm looking to roster.
But rookies also like quarterback, like utilizing the tight ends. But
that's true.
While he did have that touchdown run, Brian, he caught 5, 4, 5, and 3 passes over that stretch. So they clearly made a point of utilizing him. Now, we're probably not going to see that every game, and it's going to, obviously going to be script dependent. But to know that that's in the range of outcomes, that's something that we could get a nice stretch. And it's funny too, because I remember talking about him on our waiver wire show, probably week 8 or 9, I'm like, oh, this isn't sustainable. What are we doing with this guy?
Yep.
Because he had that stretch. He didn't play week 1, but then week 2 he caught a touchdown. Week 3 he caught a touchdown, and week 4 he caught the 3 touchdowns, and that's when everybody went wild and he was rostered everywhere. And I was like, that's not sustainable. And he went 5 straight weeks without a touchdown. He did have one game with 5 catches and 80 yards, which is nice. And then I was like, oh, yeah, see, I'm right. And then he comes out with that stretch from week 11 to week 15. And then even in week 17 caught that touchdown. So touchdowns are fantastic at the tight end position, but they're not something you want to bank on.
No, especially looking at the numbers. He actually ranked 24th in the amount of targets he saw last year at the position.
Mm-hmm.
This is with a team trying to work Alan Lazard in, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Quanius St. Brown. Like, all these guys all missed time. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
it's not a high upside.
Yeah. I think he has a lot of potential. I think he can be a top 5 option. Now, if somebody in your league wants to draft him as such, and they take him as tight end 7 or 8 or 9, or even in that top 12, then let them do that, and then go to another option. But if he's falling and he's sitting there, and you've been patient, and he is there, he isn't absolutely worth taking a gamble on, and then, much like quarterback, if things don't go well, you drop him for the waiver wire fodder of the week and the best matchups and whatnot. Because there is, while it's not quite as appealing as quarterback, there is some interesting names inside the outside the top 10 or 12 or so. That could you could make a compelling case could easily vault inside. And one of those names is next on Brian's list, and I'm coming around to this guy more and more as we head towards the season.
Yeah, Jared Cook, I don't understand why people are not all over him right now, considering the years that he played in New Orleans. He was a top 12, top 14 guy off draft boards at the position, sometimes top 10, playing with Drew Brees. Now he's going to a Chargers team where Hunter Henry last year was one of the top 8 guys at the position. He saw 93 targets, had 60 receptions. He missed a couple of games during this time. He's playing on an offense that really made no moves on the outside, minus, getting Keenan Allen and Mike Williams fully healthy this offseason. Yeah. And he's going to be the receiving threat at the position. He's averaged over 12 yards of reception in 10 of his 12 years. The only times he didn't were like 8 years ago in his rookie season. Justin Herbert, again, going back to this point, is being drafted as QB6, and Jared Cook is likely 3A, 3B in terms of target share with Austin Eckler. I don't see why this guy's not going within the top 10 at the position, just knowing what the kind of upside that this offense brings going into year 2 with Herbert at the helm.
Yeah, no, I'm totally in agreement with you. His last 2 years in New Orleans, he saw about 60-ish targets, but caught 9 and 7 touchdowns. I think those are very reasonable numbers for this year. I think it's Keenan Allen. I think it's Austin Eckler, and then Cook and Mike Williams are kind of battling for that third role in terms of volume. But I think this offense could be cooking. I think Justin Herbert's ready to, we saw a lot, and it kind of faded as the year went along. But I think we'll see a new vigor. I think the new coach will kind of bring some new schemes to help open up things. And I think Jared Cook could absolutely be a benefactor of that, of the new offense, of the updated offense. And I think there's a lot of potential for him to kind of thrive and be maybe a guy, not necessarily, the 100 targets we saw in 2018 in Oakland, but, maybe 80-ish targets, maybe he catches 50 balls, maybe he scores 6, 7, 8 touchdowns. Like I think all those numbers make sense. And I think all that points to a guy who could be inside that top 10 to 12 at tight end.
Yep.
Let's keep it moving and let's talk about my next guy. If you're digging deep, Cole Kmet is a guy that I'm finding myself gravitating towards. Usually in best ball leagues is kind of my second or third guy, but tight end 31, basically undrafted in most leagues. If you're in a Bears only league, then maybe he goes a little bit higher. But I'm really excited to see what the Chicago offense can look like. I'm optimistic it can be Justin Fields. Brian's a little more red rifle. But that
Yes.
either way, I think Cole Kmet has value and has upside, and I think obviously Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney will garner a lot of attention, but I expect Kmet to take a big step forward in year two. I think that offense just will be a lot more like reliable and professional and kind of move forward. And Matt Nagy is a good offensive mind that has a lot of good skills, and I think just stable quarterback play is going to do so much for that offense. And as somebody who watched a ton of Justin Fields at Ohio State, loves using the tight end, loves ripping the seam and throwing in. Then when they get in the red zone, and Cole Kmet is a big athletic guy that has a ton of upside. And if you're in dynasty leagues, he's somebody that I'm out fielding offers for. I'm trying to get him on some of my rosters in best ball and in deeper leagues. He's absolutely somebody I'm trying to get, and somebody who could be fun to take early. And it's not going according to plan. You throw them back to the pile and you go get your Hayden Hurst or Jared Cook or Robert Tonyan or Evan Ingram or whoever, and see if we can't cobble together something. But I think he has a ton of upside, and in deeper formats, if you want to attack running back and receiver and wait for tight end, Kmet could be a great option.
Yeah, Cole Kmet is a guy who I'm very eagerly awaiting to see them unleash. I mean, when you look at what he did starting in week 12 all the way through the end of the season, he saw 6 or more targets in 4 of those 5 games that he played. He saw his snap percentage on offense increase from right around in the 30s all the way up to 75 or more in all of those games to end the season. You're looking at a quarterback in Andy Dalton who could potentially be at the helm here, who the aforementioned Dalton Schultz got to see 90 targets last year with Dalton. We saw Tyler Eifert put up big seasons with Dalton. We saw CJ Uzama put up a big season with Andy Dalton at the helm. So Andy Dalton, if he's the quarterback here, he loves throwing to his tight ends and his number one wide receiver. So I think that there is a good possibility that Cole Kmet could, if he's given the opportunity, wind up inside the top 10, even the top 8 at the position, and just knowing the volume that is potentially there for him.
Yeah, and tight end is notoriously a position that takes at least a season, usually a couple seasons, to really gain control of the offense, and they got to learn the blocking schemes and all that stuff. And Matt Nagy is, but we've also seen what Matt Nagy can do. I mean, obviously, it's Travis Kelce, and he's the god tier tight end, but he knows how to scheme for athletic tight ends that have playmaking ability. So that's another little feather. And once again, this is a guy that we're saying take a shot on, not draft in the 7th round and see what you can do. So if you want to be super patient, if there's a handful of guys that you like and they all happen to go and there's no one else you're really excited about, you take a Cole Kmet, and then if it doesn't work, then you can go get somebody off the waiver wire. Brian's getting real dirty on this one, digging way down. If you've been watching the show for a while, you've heard this name. Apparently we're doing the Dan Arnold thing again.
Yeah, Sam Darnold throwing the Dan Arnold. I mean, I talked about Sam Darnold as a potential QB sleeper, and that's for the same reason I like him as the same reason I like Dan Arnold here. He's stepping into a situation where Carolina has clearly lost its patience with Ian Thomas, who we thought was going to be a thing. He's just
I think I've lost my patience with Ian Thomas.
He hasn't amounted to anything. Dan Arnold posted career best numbers last year with 40 plus receptions, over 400 something yards, 4 touchdowns. And his skill set is one that will be heavily utilized in this offense, who likes to get the ball down the field and throw a ton. And that's one that he's more of a tweener. He's not that traditional line up on the end of the line of scrimmage type tight end. They're going to be splitting him out wide, taking advantage of his height and stuff like that against smaller corners and slower linebackers. And Sam Darnold, he produced Chris Herndon during his rookie season. He busted out in a big way. He targeted Ryan Griffin a ton of times when Herndon was out. Saw like I think it was like 6 or 7 touchdowns in the second year that Darnold was playing with the Jets. And I just think with this offense, Dan Arnold's familiarity with Joe Brady, who was his offensive coordinator in New Orleans as a rookie and a second-year player, where we started to see his ascension into that offense post Jimmy Graham era. I just think that this is the time that Dan Arnold really comes into his own, and this offense kind of takes off in a big way, playing in a division that's going to have 3 other offenses that are going to be scoring a ton.
Yeah, no, I don't hate it. He's a big physical guy who's built more like a receiver than like a tight end. Really fits into kind of what the modern NFL wants to do. Over on Player Profiler, he's got a 98th percentile burst score, 94th percentile agility score, and a 95th percentile catch radius. That sounds like somebody who can get open pretty quickly, can be a threat when they get in the red zone. Because as much as I like what DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson can do, they might need a little more size, a little more jump in the in the red zone, and he could be an interesting option down there. And find when you have really good receivers on the outside, the middle of the field tends to see a little more openness, a little more opportunity. So maybe that's something there too. So yes, I if you're doing best balls, if you're doing 18 round deeper leagues, if you're doing 14 teams or more, I think Dan Arnold makes a ton of sense there. And if you're in Dynasty and you're like, I like my tight ends, but I could use a little depth, Arnold could be somebody that's maybe not either he's floating around waiver wires, or he's somebody that you could get on the cheap, a 4th rounder or so. Somebody, because people are going to have to make tough cut decisions. So if you send like, hey, I'll give you a future pick, even if it's just a 4th rounder, Dan Arnold could be somebody who does a nice bye week fill in, or ends up popping and kind of is helpful a few weeks throughout the season. So I don't hate it, but it is funny to do this again, especially considering we did the Ian Thomas song and dance last year, and I couldn't end up with more egg on my face after that one. So man, I wanted him to be good. He just wasn't. I did want to throw a few names out there. Irv Smith, somebody that, depending on where you're drafting, I think makes a ton of sense. His ADP is kind of wild. Some have him in like the 8 to 12 range. Some have him outside. But he's somebody I'm very excited about getting kind of a full starters reps in Minnesota. Evan Ingram is another guy that we talked about Daniel Dimes over on the quarterback pod, but makes a ton of sense. And then Brian, our guy Hayden Hurst.
Yep.
I'm becoming a lot more optimistic on what Kyle Pitts can be, but even in this offense, I could see a world where Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts and Hayden Hurst and Russell Gage are all on the field together, and they're finding unique ways, and they're lining Pitts up in the slot, because we saw that at Florida, and he can absolutely be a versatile weapon that kind of lines up in a myriad of spots. So Hayden Hurst is another guy who could see 50 to 70 targets, and
I think it's also I think it's also really important to note that Arthur Smith, when he was at Tennessee, the 2 years that he was there as offensive coordinator, both years, tight ends were pretty heavily utilized in this offense. Last year, it was both Jonnu Smith and Anthony Firkser seeing close to 50 or more targets. Yep. And then the previous year, they were right around in like the 30s and the 40s. So he likes to run a 2 tight end system. The way that they run this play action type of offense with them, playing the seams, getting down the field, I think is going to be really pertinent to what they want to do. And then especially inside the red zone, it's not going to be the traditional Atlanta Falcons. Let's spread everyone out down here. They're going to get tight. They're going to be playing with Hurst and Pitts on the field. It's going to be a lot of opportunities for scoring from the tight end position. So yeah, Hurst is a great tight end too, late addition.
Yeah, and we talked about there's a learning curve for tight ends. It's one of the toughest positions to transfer, and especially if Kyle Pitts is having issues with his blocking and is okay, well, we'll play Hayden as the natural tight end, and basically Kyle Pitts will just come in when they're throwing and kind of spreading things out. That could be,
Yep.
this could be a lot more 50-50, 60-40 than I think anybody drafting Kyle Pitts really wants to admit. Obviously, when you're drafting Pitts in something like a best ball, you're shooting for ceiling, not for floor, but he's going early. He's going to inside that top 5 or so at the position. So there's a lot of risk there. So yeah, Hurst is somebody that I find myself gravitating towards if I need another tight end late in best ball drafts, or could be somebody that all of a sudden in week 3, week 4, we're talking about waiver wire ads, and he's the top priority because he's seeing 5 to 6 targets a game, and Kyle Pitts hasn't quite grasped the full time role yet.
Yeah, I had, and then one more guy I wanted to hit on was a dude that 2 years ago everyone was all over as a potential next big thing, and that's Chris Herndon.
Yeah,
with the Jets. Towards the back end of last year, the last like 3 or 4 games, he started to see increased playing time. He saw 4+ targets in each of the last 3 games. He's more of a downfield type of option. With rookie quarterback Zach Wilson there, like you said, rookies like to lean on the tight ends because they have more often than not one-on-one matchups and they're open. So I think Herndon is another late round flyer, waiver wire addition early in the season that could have the potential to produce tight end 1 numbers.
Another one in that bucket, I think, is Adam Troutman. We've seen what Jameis has done with Cameron Brate and other tight ends in the past. He likes throwing to that middle of the field, and even if it's Taysom Hill, I think Troutman could be interesting as well as a guy who's going basically, between tight end 20 and tight end 30, depending on where you look. Another value, another guy that maybe you don't draft him, maybe he's a waiver wire, kind of priority guy that you kind of keep an eye on, and then when whoever you happen to draft is kind of frustrating you, he can be a nice pivot too, as well. So I think that's a bunch of really good names. Brian and I, like I mentioned, we did our sleepers at quarterback. We'll be doing running backs and receivers in the coming days. So make sure if you're following on YouTube, you're subscribed, you have the bell notification on, so when our latest content hits the feed. If you're on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify, make sure you subscribe over there. If you're on iTunes and you can give us a review, it would do a lot to help us. We really appreciate that. 5 stars.
5 stars.
And if you're listening on Spotify or something else, take 2 seconds, go over there, throw a 5-star rating on there. And we'll really, really, really appreciate you taking 2 seconds to help us. Goes a long way. So for Brian Twining, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.